During the chaos of war, one soldier's watch survived an explosion that should have shattered everything. Decades later, long after the soldier was gone, that same watch still ticked passed down through generations, carrying a secret no one expected. What if a simple object could keep time and keep a hidden truth alive? The battlefield was chaos. Smoke curled into the gray sky, the ground shook with distant artillery, and shattered helmets lay scattered across the mud. Amidst the noise and fire, Sergeant Edward Hayes clutched his chest, thrown to the ground by the force of a nearby blast. His uniform was torn, his hands bleeding, but his eyes fixed on one thing: the watch strapped to his wrist. The glass was cracked, the casing dented, yet the second hand kept moving with relentless precision. Tick, tick, tick. It was a gift from his father before he left for the front. "This watch has outlasted me," his father had said. "Now let it outlast you." As Edward pushed himself up, gasping for air, he realized the watch was more than a keepsake. It was a reminder that time itself hadn't abandoned him, even when the world around him tried to break. That night, as silence returned to the camp, and soldiers buried their dead, Edward lay staring at the damaged watch. Every tick was a heartbeat, every second a promise. He didn't know it then, but that watch would carry his story long after the war ended, long after his own heart stopped. When the war finally ended, Sergeant Edward Hayes returned home carrying scars he never spoke of and the watch that had survived with him. Its cracked glass caught the sunlight as he stepped off the train, and though his uniform was faded, the ticking on his wrist was steady, almost defiant. Life moved forward. Edward married, built a quiet home on the edge of town, and raised children who never truly understood the shadows that followed him. He rarely spoke of the war. When asked, he would smile faintly and change the subject. But every evening, as the house settled into silence, Edward would take off the watch, place it on the nightstand, and listen to its steady rhythm before falling asleep. Years passed. His hair turned gray, his hands rough with age, but the watch never failed. Neighbors' clocks broke, radios crackled and died, but the watch kept ticking. For Edward, it became a silent companion, the one piece of the battlefield that didn't leave him. When he passed away, the watch was handed to his son, Michael Hayes. At the funeral, as the family gathered around, Michael slipped the aged timepiece onto his own wrist. Its weight was more than metal. It carried the heartbeat of his father, and perhaps something deeper, a memory, a secret, a promise. Michael didn't know it yet, but the watch would speak again. Michael Hayes wore the watch through the milestones of his life. He wore it on his wedding day, the faint crack on its glass glimmering under church lights. He wore it when his first child was born, holding his daughter in trembling hands while the watch ticked softly against her tiny blanket. Yet, unlike his father, Michael often wondered aloud about its resilience. He had repaired radios, cars, even pocket watches before, but this one had never needed fixing. It simply endured. At night, when the house was quiet, he would sit at the kitchen table, running his fingers over the dented casing. The metal was scarred, but the ticking inside was steady, almost stubborn. It felt less like a machine and more like a heartbeat. Michael's wife once asked, "Why keep it? You could buy a new one." He only shook his head. "It's not just a watch, it's him." The watch became his anchor, a silent reminder of the man who had carried it through fire and fury. But it was also a mystery, because sometimes, late at night, Michael swore he could hear more than ticking. In those quiet moments, he thought he could almost hear his father's voice, steady, calm, telling him to keep going. He never told anyone, but deep down, he began to wonder, was the watch only keeping time, or was it keeping something else alive? Decades later, the watch found its way to David Hayes, Michael's son. By then, the strap was worn thin, the face clouded with scratches, but the second hand still moved without pause. David was different from his father and grandfather. He was curious, restless, a man who wanted answers rather than mysteries. On his 21st birthday, when the watch was handed down to him, he held it up to the light and muttered, "How can something this old still work?" He took it apart on his workbench, spreading tiny gears across the cloth, expecting to find broken pieces or rust. Instead, he found precision. The mechanism was flawless, almost untouched by time. And then, tucked behind the inner casing, he found something else. A small, folded piece of paper. Hands trembling, David unfolded it. The paper was yellowed and fragile, but the writing was still visible. His eyes scanned the words, and with each line, his breath grew shorter. It wasn't just a message. It was a secret. The watch had not only survived the war, it had carried with it the final words of a soldier who had known he might never return. Words his father and grandfather had never seen. And now, those words belonged to David. David's hands shook as he unfolded the fragile slip of paper. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear, written in a steady hand, marked with the weight of war. If you are reading this, it means the watch has outlived me. This timepiece has carried me through fire, through loss, through nights when I thought I would not see the sun again. But it is more than metal and gears. It carries my promise that even when I am gone, my time will still beat with yours. The message was signed, Edward Hayes. David froze. The name was familiar, his grandfather, the man who had survived the blast, the man whose silence about the war had always been a mystery. For years, Edward's son Michael had worn the watch, hearing only its ticking. For decades, the family had passed it down as a keepsake. None of them had known that inside, hidden all along, was Edward's final testimony, his voice reaching across time. David whispered into the quiet room, "Grandpa, you left this for me." In that moment, the watch stopped being just a relic. It became a bridge, a heartbeat passed from generation to generation, carrying not only survival, but a soldier's eternal promise. The letter was more than words on a page, it was a bridge across time. In shaky handwriting, the soldier had written, "If this watch still ticks, then so does the memory of our sacrifice. Carry it with honor. And when the time comes, pass it to someone who will listen." The young man's hands trembled as he set the watch gently back on the table. He felt the weight of his grandfather's silence, the battles never spoken of, and the resilience hidden inside a simple object. From that day forward, the watch never left his side. He wore it not as a timepiece, but as a promise, a reminder that courage, loyalty, and sacrifice do not fade with years. And every tick, faint but steady, echoed the voices of those who came before him, whispering that true strength is not in the medals on a chest, but in the stories we choose to carry. The years rolled on, yet the watch remained steady. It ticked through birthdays, graduations, and quiet nights of self-doubt. The young man, now older, often found himself gazing at it when life grew heavy. Each tick was a reminder that storms could be endured, that silence could hold strength, and that even the smallest of objects could carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. One evening, his own daughter wandered into the study, curious about the old wristwatch that never seemed to stop. "Daddy, whose watch is that?" she asked, her voice innocent but filled with wonder. He smiled softly, just as his grandfather once had, and placed it gently into her small hands. "This," he whispered, "is more than a watch. It's a promise that time may pass, but courage lives on." The girl's eyes widened as the ticking filled the silence between them. She didn't fully understand, but she felt the weight of something greater than herself, a legacy being passed forward, one heartbeat at a time. And so, the watch continued. Not just a keeper of time, but a keeper of memory, resilience, and an unbroken bond between generations. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video. For more emotional and inspiring war stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is part of this journey too. Remember, some watches don't just keep time, they carry memories.